You need to watch this if you crave chills down your spine. Welcome to Soul Studios. Here, true crime meets the unknown. Suspense lurks in every shadow, and supernatural forces whisper from the dark. We craft chilling, edge-of-your-seat short stories inspired by the eerie, the unexplained, and the most haunting mysteries. 3 new stories drop every week, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to step inside? Subscribe now before the next story finds you.
Jessica Monroe thought she had escaped her past, but when a mysterious book arrives at her doorstep, filled with eerie warnings and a name she was meant to forget, her nightmare begins again. As she unravels a deadly secret buried in her small town, the bodies stack up, the messages grow darker, and the truth becomes undeniable. She was never meant to survive. With a sadistic stalker watching her every move and an ex-husband harboring secrets of his own, Jessica must race against time before she becomes the next chapter in a killer's twisted masterpiece. But some stories don't end when the villain dies. Some stories are just getting started. Would you open the book if you knew it was written in blood? Marked for Murder, a story you'll never forget. Chapter 1. The Package. December 3rd, 1996, Oak Hollow, Pennsylvania. The small town of Oak Hollow looked like something out of a holiday postcard, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests that stretched for miles. Snow dusted the sidewalks, clinging to the bare branches of towering maples lining the quiet streets. Christmas decorations adorned every shopfront, their twinkling lights reflecting off the icy pavement. A thin veil of fog hung low over the town as the sun began its slow descent behind the hills. It was the kind of town where everyone knew each other, where doors were left unlocked, and where the biggest scandal in recent years had been the mayor's son getting caught shoplifting a pack of cigarettes. Oak Hollow was safe, predictable. Jessica Monroe, a 28-year-old single mother, tucked a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear as she pulled her coat tighter against the cold. She had just finished a long shift at Hollowbrook Cafe, the town's only diner, where she worked as a waitress to support her 5-year-old son, Caleb. It wasn't her dream job. She had once planned on becoming a teacher, but life had taken a different turn when she found herself raising a child alone after her ex-husband, Ethan, left town 2 years ago. Jessica's home sat on the outskirts of Oak Hollow, a small one-story house with chipping white paint and a wraparound porch. It was cozy but lonely, too big for just her and Caleb. The silence weighed on her at night, especially during the long winter months. When she pulled into the driveway, she noticed something unusual. A brown, paper-wrapped package sat neatly on her doorstep. No return address, no markings except for her name, written in neat, almost mechanical handwriting. Her brows furrowed. She hadn't ordered anything. It wasn't Caleb's birthday, and Christmas was still weeks away. A shiver, not from the cold, ran down her spine. She glanced around the street, empty, the neighbouring houses quiet. The streetlights flickered on, casting an eerie glow over the frozen pavement. Jessica hesitated before picking up the package. It was light, almost weightless. With her keys in one hand and the package in the other, she stepped inside, locking the door behind her. Inside the house. The warmth of the house was a welcome contrast to the chill outside. Caleb was at his grandmother's house for the night, which meant Jessica had the evening to herself, something she usually relished. But tonight, an unsettling feeling crept in as she placed the package on the kitchen table and examined it more closely. She tore away the paper, revealing a worn paperback book. The cover was faded, the edges frayed. The title, The Silent Man, by an author she didn't recognize. Jessica frowned. A mystery novel? Who would send her this? She flipped it over, scanning the synopsis. It was about a woman being stalked by an unknown figure, someone who watched her from the shadows, leaving cryptic messages behind. The plot felt unsettlingly close to something real, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. She almost tossed it aside, but then she noticed something strange. Inside, certain words and sentences had been underlined in red ink. At first they seemed random, but as she skimmed the pages, a pattern emerged. She thought she was safe, but he was always watching. She should have listened. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a used book with a previous owner's notes. Someone had marked this for her. A cold knot formed in her stomach. The final passage that was underlined sent a jolt of fear straight through her chest. She didn't know why he chose her, but by the time she figured it out, it was too late. Jessica slammed the book shut, her pulse hammering. Someone was trying to tell her something. Chapter 2. A Familiar Horror. The walls of Jessica's small kitchen suddenly felt too close, the air too thick. She could hear the old radiator hissing, the slow tick of the clock on the wall. Every sound felt magnified, each creak of the house now suspicious. She swallowed hard, staring at the closed book sitting on the table as if it might spring to life and tell her who had sent it. She forced herself to think rationally. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe Lena had found this book at a thrift shop and thought it would be funny to scare her. But no, Lena knew she didn't do well with horror. And even if she had, why wouldn't she have just signed her name on the package? Jessica's fingers twitched as she reached for the book again. Her gut told her to throw it away, to pretend it had never arrived. But she couldn't ignore it. The fact that someone had gone through it, underlining specific passages, meant something. She flipped it back open, scanning the underlined sections again, her heartbeat picking up speed. She thought she was safe. But he was always watching. She should have listened. She didn't know why he chose her, but by the time she figured it out, it was too late. Jessica sucked in a breath and turned the book over in her hands. Maybe there was something else. A note, a receipt, something that could tell her where it had come from. She rifled through the pages, shaking them loose. Nothing fell out. She was about to give up when she noticed something penciled into the margin of page 147. It wasn't underlined like the others, but it was a note written in small, slanted handwriting. This isn't fiction. Jessica's entire body went cold. She slammed the book shut again, her hands shaking. A heavy silence filled the room. She forced herself to breathe, to calm the racing thoughts in her head. This wasn't happening. This was just some sick joke. It had to be. But that feeling crept back, the one she had earlier, when she was standing outside, when she felt like someone was watching her. She turned slowly toward the kitchen window. It faced the backyard, where the old swing set Caleb barely used anymore stood frozen in place. Beyond it, the woods stretched far, dark and deep, swallowing up the weak glow of her porch light. She squinted, eyes scanning the tree line. Nothing. But then, a shift. A flicker of movement in the shadows. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. She told herself it was the wind, a trick of the light, anything but what she feared it was. But the longer she stood there, the more she was convinced that someone was standing at the edge of the woods, watching her house. She took a slow step back, her heart hammering now. She couldn't see his face, but she knew. He was real, and he wasn't going anywhere. Chapter 3. A past she can't escape. Jessica's pulse pounded in her ears as she backed away from the window. She refused to blink, afraid that if she looked away, the figure in the trees might move closer. But the longer she stared, the more uncertain she became. Was someone really there? Or was it just her mind playing tricks on her? She fumbled for the light switch, flipping it off, plunging the kitchen into darkness. With the glow of the street lamps outside now the only source of light, she edged toward the window again, pressing her body flat against the wall as she peered out. The figure was gone. Jessica's breath hitched. Had she imagined it? No. She knew what she saw. Her hands were shaking as she stepped away from the window. She needed to get a grip. If someone had really been out there, wouldn't they have knocked? Wouldn't they have left something behind? Unless they already had. Her eyes darted back to the book sitting on the kitchen table. This isn't fiction. The words scrawled inside echoed in her head. Jessica grabbed the book and hurried into the living room, sinking onto the couch. She curled her legs beneath her, rubbing her arms to ward off the chill seeping into her bones. There had to be some kind of explanation. She reached for the phone and quickly dialed her best friend, Lena Carter. The line rang 3 times before a groggy voice answered. "Jess, it's almost midnight. What's going on?" Jessica hesitated, suddenly aware of how paranoid she must sound. But she had to tell someone. "I got a package today. A book. No return address," she said, voice tight. Someone marked it up. Certain words, phrases, they make it sound like a warning. Lena was silent for a moment. Then, what kind of book? A murder mystery. Lena made a noise. Okay, that's weird, but maybe it's just a weird gift. Could Ethan have sent it? Jessica clenched her jaw. Ethan Monroe, her ex-husband, the man who walked out of their lives 2 years ago when being a husband and father became too much for him. She hadn't heard from him in months. No, this isn't his style, she muttered. Then who? Jessica exhaled and let her head drop back against the couch. Jess, I know this is freaking you out, but are you sure you're not reading too much into it? Jessica sat up. Lena, there was a message written inside the book. Silence. Then, what kind of message? Jessica swallowed. It said, "This isn't fiction." Lena's breath hitched. Okay, that's creepy. Jessica stood pacing. And then, while I was on the phone with you, I thought I saw someone outside, watching. Jesus. I don't know what to do, Jessica whispered. Lena hesitated. Do you want me to come over? No. Caleb's not home tonight, and I don't want to drag you into something if this turns out to be nothing. Lena sighed. Fine, but if you get another one of those books, I want to know. And Jess? Yeah? Lock your doors. Double-check your windows. Jessica nodded, even though Lena couldn't see her. I will. After hanging up, she did exactly that, checking every lock, pulling every curtain tight. But even as she crawled into bed, the book lay on her nightstand, its presence an unsettling weight in the room. She tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't shut off. Chapter 4, The Book's Origins. Jessica barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind replayed the image of the shadowy figure standing at the tree line. The underlined words from the book burned in her memory. She thought she was safe, but he was always watching. By the time the first hints of daylight crept through the blinds, she had made up her mind. She needed to find out where this book came from. Caleb would be home by the afternoon, so she had a few hours to dig into this before he returned. She wasn't going to let whatever this was bleed into her son's life. After a quick shower and a cup of coffee, she grabbed the book and headed into town. Hollowbrook Books. The Hollowbrook Books shop sat between an antique store and a flower shop on Main Street. The bell jingled as Jessica pushed open the heavy glass door, stepping into the cosy warmth of the bookstore. The scent of old paper and coffee filled the air. A woman in her 60s, Maggie Dempsey, stood behind the counter, flipping through a hardback novel. She looked up and smiled. Well, if it isn't Jessica Monroe. Haven't seen you in here in a while, Hon. Jessica forced a smile. Hey, Maggie, I need your help. Maggie set the book down. Of course. What's going on? Jessica placed the mystery novel on the counter, tapping the cover. I got this in the mail yesterday. No return address, no note. Someone marked up a bunch of passages. I thought maybe you'd recognize it. Maggie adjusted her glasses and picked up the book, flipping through the pages. The Silent Man. Haven't seen a copy of this in a long time. Jessica's stomach tightened. You've heard of it? Oh, sure. It came out, I'd say about 15 years ago. Used to have a small cult following. You don't see many copies around anymore. Maggie stopped flipping pages when she spotted the underlined passages. She frowned. Goodness, someone really went at this one, didn't they? Jessica nodded. Do you have any idea where this book might have come from? Could someone have bought it here? Maggie shook her head. Not from me. I haven't had a copy of this in stock for years. She hesitated. Why? Something wrong? Jessica debated telling her everything, but decided against it. I feel like whoever sent it was trying to tell me something. Maggie studied her for a long moment before sighing. I'll tell you this much. The Silent Man was loosely based on a real case. A woman in Pennsylvania disappeared back in the early 80s. Some say the book was inspired by what happened to her. Jessica's breath hitched. Wait, a real case? Maggie nodded. It was before your time, but folks around here might remember. I think her name was Margaret Langley. Went missing, never found. Some people swore she was being stalked before she vanished. Rumours went around that she got messages before she disappeared, but the police never proved anything. Jessica's skin prickled. This was too much of a coincidence. Margaret Langley, a woman who disappeared after being stalked. A woman who may have gotten a book just like this one. This wasn't just some strange prank. Someone was trying to send Jessica a message. The police report. As soon as she left the bookstore, Jessica drove to the Oak Hollow Police Department. The station was small, barely more than a convert office building, but it served the quiet town well. She pushed through the front doors, her nerves tight. At the front desk, a young officer, Deputy Mark Hughes, looked up. "Jessica? Everything okay?" Jessica had met Mark a few times. He'd gone to school with Ethan, and he'd always been friendly. But today, she didn't have time for small talk. "I need to see any records you have on a woman named Margaret Langley. She went missing years ago." Mark frowned. "That's before my time. Why are you asking?" Jessica hesitated, then exhaled. "Someone sent me a book, a murder mystery based on her case. Someone marked it up like they were trying to send me a message. That got Mark's attention." "A book?" Jessica nodded. "And I think whoever sent it knows something. I need to know what happened to her." Mark rubbed the back of his neck. She waited as he disappeared into the back. After 10 minutes he returned, holding a thin, yellowed folder. "This is all I could pull," he said, placing it on the desk. Jessica opened it, her hands slightly shaking. Inside were old newspaper clippings, police reports, and a black-and-white photo of Margaret Langley. Jessica's stomach dropped. Margaret had the same dark auburn hair as Jessica, the same green eyes. She wasn't just a random woman from a decades-old case. She looked like her. Jessica's hands went clammy. This wasn't just about the book. This was about her. She looked up at Mark, her throat dry. "Do you think someone could still be out there, watching?" Mark hesitated, then said, "I don't know, but if they are, we need to find out why." Jessica swallowed hard, gripping the file tighter. She had a feeling she already knew the answer. Chapter 5. The Stranger's Return. Jessica drove home with the file on Margaret Langley resting on the passenger seat, but she couldn't bring herself to open it again. Margaret wasn't just some long-forgotten case. She looked like her. Same auburn hair, same green eyes, same build. And now Jessica had received a book that mirrored Margaret's story, complete with warnings hidden in plain sight. She gripped the steering wheel tighter as she turned onto her street. The afternoon sun had begun to dip, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. Her house stood at the far end of the block, separated from the others by a row of tall, leafless trees. It had always felt private, safe, but today it felt isolated. She pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, scanning the yard, the windows, the porch. Nothing seemed out of place, and yet the uneasy feeling in her gut remained. She grabbed the book and the police file, locking the car behind her as she hurried up the steps. Her breath puffed in the cold air as she fumbled with the key. Then she stopped. Something was different. She turned slowly, scanning the porch. At first she didn't see anything. Then her eyes landed on the doormat. Her stomach clenched. Another package, smaller than the last, wrapped in the same plain brown paper, no return address. Jessica's fingers went cold as she crouched down, her heart hammering. She didn't want to touch it. She didn't want to know what was inside. But she had no choice. She lifted the package and tore away the paper, revealing a single cassette tape. No label, no note, just a tape. Jessica's breath hitched. Who the hell still used cassette tapes? She stood quickly, scanning the street. Nobody. No cars driving by, no one standing in the yards. But she knew someone had been here. Recently, watching. She shoved the tape into her pocket and hurried inside, locking the door behind her. The tape. Jessica didn't own a cassette player. The last time she'd even seen one was years ago in high school, but she knew where to find one. The basement. She hesitated at the top of the stairs. She hated going down there. It was always cold, always damp, and the overhead bulb flickered no matter how many times she replaced it. But she needed to know what was on the tape. She grabbed a flashlight from the drawer and made her way downstairs, stepping carefully over the uneven wood planks. Boxes of Caleb's old toys and Ethan's abandoned belongings lined the walls. Then there it was, her dad's old stereo system, buried under a stack of dusty records. Jessica let out a shaky breath and pulled the cassette from her pocket. She stared at it for a moment, debating whether she should call someone first. Mark, Lena, anyone. But she had to know. With a deep breath, she slid the tape into the player and pressed play. At first, there was nothing but static, then a sound. A deep, rhythmic breathing. Jessica's blood ran cold. Someone was breathing into the recorder. She turned up the volume, straining to hear. Then, a voice. Low, raspy. You know what happens next. Jessica's pulse exploded in her ears. The tape clicked, then went silent. She staggered back, her chest tightening. She knew that voice. She hadn't heard it in over a decade, but she could never forget it. It belonged to Daniel Rourke, and he was supposed to be in prison. Chapter 6. A Connection to the Past. Jessica's knees nearly buckled as she stared at the old cassette player. Daniel Rourke. The name sent a wave of nausea through her. She hadn't spoken his name in years, had done everything in her power to forget, but hearing his voice, low, taunting, unmistakable, dragged her back to a place she had spent over a decade trying to escape. Daniel Rourke was a monster, and now he was back. Her hands trembled as she yanked the tape from the player, stuffing it into her coat pocket. She needed answers. She needed to know how this was even possible. The case of Daniel Rourke. 15 years ago, Jessica had been just 19, fresh out of high school, working a summer job at Little Sprouts daycare before heading off to college. Daniel Rourke had been the janitor there. He was quiet, strange, always lurking just a little too long in the hallways. At first, she hadn't thought much of him. Just a guy doing his job. But then the letters started. They had been slipped into her locker, filled with obsessive ramblings, unsettling declarations of love. He knew things about her. Where she lived, what time she walked to work, what she wore. She had ignored them at first, thinking it was some sick joke. Until the night she saw him standing outside her bedroom window. Watching. She had gone straight to the police. Her statement, along with another young woman's, had led to his arrest after they discovered a box of stolen women's belongings in his apartment. Necklaces, photographs, a single lock of Jessica's hair. He had been sentenced to 10 years for aggravated stalking and harassment. And now, somehow, he was free. A dead end. Jessica gripped the steering wheel tightly as she pulled into the Oak Hollow Police Department parking lot, her heart hammering against her ribs. Deputy Mark Hughes looked surprised to see her again so soon. "Jess, what's going on?" She slammed the cassette tape onto the counter. "Daniel Rourke. He sent this to me." Mark's expression shifted instantly. "What?" She crossed her arms over her chest, trying to steady herself. "I heard his voice on the tape. He's back, Mark. He's watching me." Mark immediately reached for his computer, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "That's impossible. He was locked up." He stopped. Jessica's stomach dropped. "What?" she whispered. Mark's jaw tensed as he turned the screen toward her. There it was. Daniel Rourke, released on parole 2 years ago. Jessica's blood turned to ice. The truth was out there. Mark exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Jess, I swear, if I'd known he was out..." Jessica felt sick. "You're telling me that for the past 2 years Daniel Rourke has been free? That no one thought to warn me?" Mark looked pained. "I don't know how he got parole, but if he's contacting you, we need to take this seriously." Jessica pulled out the book from her bag and shoved it toward him. "It's not just the tape, Mark. Someone sent me this. It's a book about a missing woman, Margaret Langley. The same woman you helped me look up yesterday. Someone underlined passages in it, and it matches what happened to her. And now this tape?" Mark looked at the book, then at her. "You think Rourke has something to do with Langley's case?" Jessica swallowed. "I think he's trying to tell me I'm next." "A cold warning." Mark nodded. "Okay, I'm going to make some calls, see where Rourke has been living. In the meantime..." Jessica's phone rang. She jumped, heart racing as she pulled it from her pocket. Unknown number. She met Mark's eyes. "It's him." Mark grabbed the phone from her hand and answered. "This is Deputy Hughes with Oak Hollow PD. Who is this?" For a moment there was only silence. Then, that same voice from the tape. Low, amused. "I was hoping to speak with Jessica." Mark's grip tightened. "You're violating a protective order, Rourke. This call is being traced." A dark chuckle crackled over the line. "Oh, officer, you don't need to trace me. I'm already so close." Jessica felt the air leave her lungs. Mark's face hardened. "You come near her, And I swear, click. The line went dead. Mark exhaled sharply, slamming the phone onto the desk. Jessica wrapped her arms around herself, her whole body trembling. He was here, somewhere nearby, watching. Mark grabbed his keys. Come on. We're getting you out of here. But Jessica wasn't just afraid anymore. She was angry. Daniel had haunted her once. She had helped put him away before. And if he thought she was going to be his next victim, he was dead wrong. Chapter 7. The Real Killer. Jessica's entire body was trembling, but it wasn't just fear anymore. It was rage. Daniel Rourke had stolen her peace once before. He had stalked her, left her living in fear, and now he was doing it all over again. But this time, she wasn't a scared 19-year-old girl. She had a son to protect, a life she had built, and she was not going to let him take it from her. Deputy Mark Hughes led her out of the station, scanning the street, as if expecting Daniel to step out of the shadows at any moment. He ushered her into his squad car, locking the doors before getting into the driver's seat. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he said, voice tight. Jessica shook her head. "I don't want to hide. I want to stop this." Mark shot her a look. "Jess, he's dangerous." "I know that," she snapped. "But I also know this isn't just about me." She grabbed the book from her bag and slammed it onto the dashboard. Margaret Langley. What if Daniel wasn't just stalking me back then? What if he was stalking her too? Mark frowned. "You think he was involved in her disappearance?" Jessica's pulse pounded. "I don't think Daniel just stalked women. I think he killed them." Mark exhaled, gripping the steering wheel. "Damn it!" Jessica's mind raced. The book, the notes, the fact that someone was trying to warn her. What if Daniel wasn't acting alone? What if there was someone else out there, someone who knew what had happened to Margaret, someone who had been trying to tell her? Mark's phone rang. He answered, and as he listened, his expression darkened. Yeah, I understand. Thanks." He hung up and looked at her. "That was the parole office," he said grimly. "Daniel Rourke was released 2 years ago. He was supposed to be checking in monthly." Jessica's stomach dropped. "And?" Mark's jaw tightened. "He hasn't checked in once, and no one knows where he is." Jessica's mind reeled. For 2 years, Daniel had been off the grid. For 2 years, he had been waiting, watching, planning, and now he was here. Jessica's fingers brushed against the book in her lap. She flipped through the pages, desperate for some kind of clue. Then her breath caught. On the inside cover, there was a name written in faded ink. E. Monroe. Jessica's blood turned to ice. Ethan Monroe. Her ex-husband. She stared at the name, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. Ethan had always been secretive about his past. He had left town abruptly, abandoning her and Caleb without much of an explanation. And now, his name was inside the book about a missing woman? Jessica's mouth went dry. What the hell was going on? The ex-husband's secret. Jessica turned to Mark, her voice shaking. "I need to find Ethan." Mark hesitated. "Jessica, I don't know," she admitted, "but he has to know something." Mark sighed. "Fine. Let's start with his last known address." Jessica clutched the book tighter as Mark pulled out of the parking lot. She had spent years believing Daniel Rourke was the only monster from her past. But now, for the first time, she wasn't sure. Chapter 8. The Truth Unfolds. The drive to Ethan Monroe's last known address felt like a fever dream. Jessica's hands clenched in her lap, her mind a storm of tangled thoughts. Daniel Rourke was out there, watching, hunting, and now Ethan's name had appeared inside the book. Was it a coincidence, or had he been hiding something from her all along? Mark drove in tense silence, his fingers tight around the steering wheel. "I don't like this, Jess," he muttered. "If Ethan's involved in this somehow, then I need to know." They pulled up outside a run-down motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. Jessica swallowed hard. This was where Ethan had been living. She climbed out of the car before she could talk herself out of it. Mark followed close behind as she walked up to the motel office, the bell jingling as she stepped inside. A bored-looking clerk glanced up from behind the counter. "You looking for a room?" Jessica shook her head. "I'm looking for Ethan Monroe." The clerk raised an eyebrow. "You a friend?" Jessica's stomach twisted. "I'm his ex-wife." The man exhaled through his nose, then jerked his thumb toward the far end of the building. "Room 112. Been staying here on and off for a year. Keeps to himself." Jessica nodded her thanks and turned to Mark, who was already reaching for his gun. "We don't know what we're walking into," he muttered. Jessica's throat was tight. Neither of them did. Jessica's heartbeat pounded as they reached the door. Mark knocked. "Ethan? Oak Hollow PD. Open up." No response. Jessica's stomach twisted. Mark knocked again, harder. "Ethan, if you're in there, open the damn door." Still nothing. Mark swore under his breath before stepping back and kicking the door in. The lock snapped, the door swinging open into darkness. Jessica hesitated at the threshold, her heart hammering. The room stank of old cigarettes and sweat. Clothes were scattered across the floor. A half-empty bottle of whiskey sat on the nightstand beside a stack of old newspaper clippings. Mark moved cautiously inside, gun drawn. Jessica's eyes swept the room, then landed on the bulletin board nailed to the wall. Her blood ran cold, dozens of photographs, all of her. Some from years ago, back when they were still married. Others were recent, taken from a distance. Jessica's breath hitched. Ethan had been watching her. A terrifying discovery. Her hands trembled as she stepped closer. Notes were scrawled beneath each photo, dates and locations. She recognized some of them. Caleb's school, her shift at Hollowbrook Cafe, and then, tucked into the corner, a familiar book. The Silent Man. Jessica reached for it, her pulse roaring in her ears. It was another copy, identical to the one she had received. She flipped it open, scanning the pages for markings. Then her breath caught. There was a note written inside. "He knows." Jessica's hands went clammy. "Jess." She turned. Mark had opened a dresser drawer. Inside was a gun, and next to it, another cassette tape. Jessica's knees nearly buckled. The tape's warning. Mark grabbed the tape and shoved it into his police recorder. The same static. Then Daniel Rourke's voice. "I told you I was close, Jessica, but you're looking in the wrong places." Jessica's blood turned to ice. Mark stiffened beside her. The voice continued, low and taunting. "Ethan was only trying to protect you. He just didn't know who he was up against." Jessica's breath hitched. Past tense. "Mark," she whispered. "Where's Ethan?" Mark was already grabbing his radio. "We need a unit tracking Ethan Monroe, now." Jessica backed toward the door, panic rising in her chest. Daniel had been watching her, but so had Ethan, and now he was missing. A race against time. Jessica turned to Mark, her heart racing. "Daniel's playing with us," she said. "He's giving us pieces, just enough to make us question everything. But there's something else, something he's not telling us." Mark's jaw tightened. "Then we need to find out what." Jessica nodded, because one thing was clear. Ethan wasn't the enemy. Daniel was, and he was already one step ahead. Chapter 9. The Final Stand. Jessica's mind raced as she and Mark sped through the dark streets of Oak Hollow. The cold night air seeped into her bones, but she barely noticed. Ethan was missing. Daniel was still out there. And now the truth was spiraling faster than she could keep up with. Mark's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He put it on speaker as he drove. "This is Hughes." A voice crackled through the speaker. "Deputy, we got something. Ethan Monroe's car was found abandoned outside the old Langley house. No sign of him." Jessica's stomach plummeted. The Langley house. The last place Margaret Langley had been seen before she vanished. Daniel Rourke was leading them there on purpose. Mark cursed under his breath. "We're on our way." The tires screeched as he made a sharp turn, heading toward the abandoned property on the outskirts of town. Jessica clutched the book in her lap, flipping through the pages, as if searching for an answer. Daniel had planned this, every step, and now Ethan was the next piece of his twisted game. The house in the woods. The Langley house was a rotting shell of its former self. The two-story structure sat at the edge of a dense forest, its windows dark and empty, the porch sagging under years of neglect. Mark parked a few yards away, killing the engine. The air was deathly still. Jessica hesitated, her breath coming fast. "You think Ethan's in there?" Mark checked his gun. Only one way to find out. They moved up the overgrown path, every step crunching against dead leaves. Jessica's pulse pounded in her ears. She hadn't been this afraid since the first time she saw Daniel standing outside her window. Mark signalled for her to stay behind him as he slowly pushed open the front door. It creaked loudly, the sound echoing through the empty house. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of damp wood. The remnants of old furniture sat covered in sheets, shadows stretching across the floor in the dim moonlight. Then a sound, a low groan. Jessica's heart leapt into her throat. Mark whipped his gun up, stepping further inside. "Ethan?" A rustling noise came from the back room. Mark moved quickly, motioning for Jessica to stay put. But she couldn't. She followed, heart hammering, as Mark pushed the door open, and there, tied to a chair in the centre of the room, was Ethan Monroe. Ethan's warning. Jessica rushed forward, but Mark held out an arm, stopping her. "Wait," he muttered. Ethan's face was bruised and bloodied, his wrists bound tightly with rope. He lifted his head, his blue eyes foggy with pain, but he focused on Jessica the moment he saw her. "Jess," he rasped, "you have to go. It's a trap." Jessica's stomach twisted. Mark quickly moved to cut Ethan loose. Who did this? Ethan's breath came fast, his whole body shaking. "Daniel, but he's—" A sound from upstairs, a slow, deliberate creak. Jessica's blood turned to ice. Mark froze, gun raised. For a moment there was only silence. Then, footstep heavy, unhurried, coming down the stairs. Jessica turned just as a figure stepped into the dim light. Daniel Rourke. Face to face with the monster, Jessica's breath caught in her throat. It had been 15 years, but she recognized him instantly. Daniel Rourke was taller than she remembered, his face leaner, his eyes dark and hollow. His lips curled into a slow, mocking smile. Well, he murmured. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't come." Mark moved fast, gun aimed at Daniel's chest. "Don't move." Daniel's expression didn't change. If anything, he looked amused. Jessica forced herself to speak, her voice shaking. "Why are you doing this?" Daniel tilted his head. "You already know." Jessica's breath hitched. "Margaret Langley, you killed her, didn't you?" A slow, deliberate nod. She was the first. Jessica's stomach churned. Daniel's gaze locked onto hers. But she wasn't supposed to be. Jessica's blood ran cold. Daniel took a step closer. "It was always supposed to be you, Jessica." The final fight. Mark moved first. He lunged, grabbing Daniel by the collar, but Daniel was fast. The gun went off. The shot, shattering a picture frame on the wall as Daniel twisted out of Mark's grip. Jessica grabbed the nearest thing she could, a rusted lamp, and swung. The metal collided with Daniel's head, sending him staggering back. Ethan, still weak, struggled to get free from his ropes. Mark recovered quickly, pinning Daniel against the wall. "It's over," he gritted out. Daniel laughed. A slow, chilling sound. "You think this is over?" he murmured. Then he lunged for Mark's gun. Jessica didn't think. She grabbed the gun Ethan had hidden in the dresser and pulled the trigger. The shot rang through the house. Daniel stilled. For a moment no one moved. Then he crumpled to the floor. Jessica stood there, shaking, the gun still clutched in her hands. Daniel wasn't laughing anymore. The end of a nightmare. The room felt too quiet as Mark checked for a pulse. He looked up at Jessica. "He's dead." Jessica exhaled sharply, her knees nearly giving out. It was over. Finally, truly over. Ethan, still tied to the chair, let out a pained chuckle. "Well," he muttered, "that was a hell of a reunion." Jessica let out a breath, half a laugh, half a sob. She turned to Mark. "Let's get the hell out of here." And with that, she stepped over Daniel's lifeless body and walked into the cold night air. Chapter 10. The final chapter. The days that followed Daniel Rourke's death were a blur. Jessica went through the motions, answering police questions, giving statements, nodding numbly as they packed up evidence from his hideout. But no matter how much they uncovered, she couldn't shake the weight of something unfinished. Daniel was dead. She had seen it happen. She had pulled the trigger. And yet, the fear lingered. The police assured her it was over. They had found dozens of books in his hideout, each one marked with the same eerie passages as the one he had sent her. Blueprints for his revenge. Notes scrawled in the margins about her schedule, her routine, the times she was alone. He had been planning this for years. But even with the case closed, even with Daniel buried in the ground, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It should have ended. So why did it feel like the final piece was still missing? Moving forward, Jessica forced herself to return to a normal life. She spent time with Caleb, making sure he felt safe. She reconnected with Lena, who had refused to leave her side after everything that had happened. She got a security system installed in her house, took self-defense classes, told herself every single day that she had won. But at night, in the quiet, when the world went still, she could still feel him. Not Daniel, something else, the watching. The paranoia never truly left. It was in the way she double-checked the locks, even when she knew she had already secured them. It was in the way her heart jumped at the sound of the mail truck, in the way she hesitated before opening packages, afraid of what might be inside. She told herself it was trauma, that it would pass. But then, the package arrived. The final delivery. It was a cold, grey morning when she found it. Jessica had just stepped outside to grab the mail, the early winter frost biting at her skin. And there, sitting neatly on her doorstep, was a small, brown-wrapped package. No return address. Her breath caught in her throat. She felt the world tilt around her as she reached down, fingers trembling. Not again. She forced herself to pick it up, scanning the street. Empty. No mail truck. No delivery van. Someone had left it by hand. She swallowed back the rising panic and carried the package inside, placing it on the kitchen table. For a long moment she just stared at it. She should call Mark, let the police handle it. But she had to know. With a shaky breath, she tore open the paper, revealing a book. Jessica's stomach clenched. But this one was different. It was blank, no title, no author. She flipped it open with numb fingers, her breath hitching. Every single page was empty. Nothing written, nothing marked, except for one thing. A single message scrawled in red ink on the first page. A new story begins. Jessica's pulse roared in her ears. Her hands shook as she stared at the words, her mind racing. A warning? A cruel joke? Or was someone else still out there watching? Jessica slammed the book shut, forcing herself to take slow, deep breaths. Daniel was dead. This should be over, but someone wanted her to know. It wasn't. She lifted her gaze to the window, staring at the empty street outside. Nothing moved. But for the first time since Daniel died, she knew she wasn't alone. The mystery was over. But the fear? The fear would never truly leave. And somewhere out there, the next chapter was waiting to be written. But stories like this don't truly end. Not when the ink is still wet. Not when the watcher is still waiting. Because somewhere in the shadows, the real nightmare is just beginning.
Every story has an end, but here, the mysteries never stop. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey into the unknown. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's plenty more waiting for you. We drop 3 new stories every week, so if you crave suspense, the unexplained and the downright chilling, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's next. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, some stories stay with you long after they're told.